The number one complaint that we see from individuals on GLP-1 medications like semaglutide, tirzepatide, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and now retatrutide is stalled results. They're losing weight and they're no longer losing weight. Or they never really got the ball rolling on their weight loss. They started losing a couple pounds and it's just creeping ever so slowly. This whole same category of slowed results and no results. By the end of this video, I promise you're going to understand exactly what is going on, why these issues are taking place, and most importantly, why you need some coaching, guidance, structure, and support. If you're literally sitting there winging it, let's say you're on these medications and you're not getting the guidance, you're not getting any help, you're working with a med spa or an online clinic, and the only time you ever hear from them is when refills are due. You know deep down there was something wrong with that, and that's probably why you're here. That's probably why you're watching this video, because you want to better understand these issues and what the solution with coaching will look like. How are we going to help fix this issue? And most importantly, while working with us, how are we going to prevent this from happening to you throughout this entire program? So let's just roll right into it. I really want to mention something too as well. There's another scenario that I think would really benefit some of you guys are in this situation from watching this video, of course. You actually hit your goal. You did hit your weight loss goal, but you're on freaking 12.5 or 15 milligrams of tirzepatide, or you're on 1.5 or 2 or 2.4 of semaglutide. You're near the maxed out dose and you're stuck. You have nowhere to go. Like, what am I going to do? Do I want to stay at a maxed out dose for the rest of my life? Probably not, let alone access and costs and all of that is a freaking nightmare. But what do you think is going to happen when you start to reduce that dose? Did you really think that reducing the dose was just going to cause no real issues? Maybe deep down intuitively, you knew that, like, oh my gosh, or maybe you've already tried. Maybe you're trying to reduce your medication, but you're noticing the propensity of rebound weight gain. Check out this study right here. 70% of the weight that was lost on semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy, was regained in a single year. So this propensity to regain weight after GLP-1 medications, this is no joke. This is a real problem. And it's not the medications before you start thinking, well, then I don't want to do these medications. No. You have to understand, when it comes to lasting weight loss as a whole, that is also extremely high, the rate of propensity to regain. About 80% of people, you can see from these studies right here, who have ever embarked on a weight loss journey and lost more than 10% of their body weight within a couple of years, they're regaining about at least 80% of it back. Lasting weight loss has always been a difficult thing. Most people regain their weight back, and it's no different on GLP-1 medications. The only difference is it's faster. And I think deep down, you kind of understood that. I will say this, last scenario will be some of you guys are on a near maxed out dose and you're not even in your weight loss goal. As you can tell, all these categories are similar enough to where I can bundle them together into a single video. Let's dive into just a brief overview of the science of weight loss plateaus, because you have to understand why this happens. So there's other names that you probably have seen me use on social media platforms. Zombie mode, starvation mode. This is all exactly the same thing. See, what's happening, and again, how would you have known better? You started these medications with excitement and enthusiasm, and no one told you any differently. No one told you that you're probably going to have to force yourself to eat. And that's a whole nother problem, because they have you dosed too high, and eating enough food is a challenge. But that's what happened. You underate. Your metabolism on average, your average human, average person should be consuming about 2,000 calories a day. So maybe 1,700 of balanced, healthy, nutritious food would produce the kind of results that we want in a nice traditional based weight loss program. Of course, we don't do things traditionally, but that kind of gives you an idea. A lot of you were freaking eating 1,500, 1,200, 1,000, even 800 calories. I've seen all the time on our first coaching calls, because we sit down and we figure out what the heck is going on. So you starve yourself. You turn into a literal zombie. And you guys watching this could probably relate, because it's not just that you're weight loss has stalled, but you're tired, you're brain foggy, you're constipated, you're feeling cold, your body's all achy. And of course, the most important issue is you're not losing weight. There's a whole bunch of science. And if you guys want to take a deeper dive as to why this happens, and the mechanics of that, I'll have in this link tree some deeper dives on weight loss plateaus on the bottom, but I want to streamline the solution. Okay. So what we're going to do when you work with us, if you decide to enroll with us, hopefully you're already scheduled for your next appointment with one of my experts, is we do a metabolic reset. So a metabolic reset is where we figure out and establish just how many calories you're eating now so that we can give you an ideal recommendation. And then we take step by step over the next several weeks, say 200 calories, give or take. It's different for each person, 200, 300. And we lock it in for 1 week at a time. And every single week, when you're working with us, there's some back and forth Q&A. How's your brain fog? How's your tiredness? How's your constipation? Are you warming up? Is the weight loss staying the same? Is your weight staying the same? Because as you can imagine, this is a very emotional state for anybody, because here we are telling you to eat more and, you know, you're worried, you're concerned, but trust me, we got you. This is what we do. And like clockwork under our supervision, what's going to likely happen is your weight will stay the same, but you will literally feel rejuvenated, restored, more energy, less brain fog, less constipation, feeling like normal. And some of you have been in this state of zombie mode and metabolic downregulation for so long that you freaking forgot what normal feels like. A lot of times we're going to get your metabolism burning almost twice as much calories as it is now. And trust me when I say moving forward to get you back into weight loss, whew, as you can imagine, that's a very powerful thing. And then when you're rolling in the program, after we do the metabolic reset, the FLOA protocol, my initial webinar, if you haven't watched that already, will teach you more about the structure. But essentially, we do lifestyle interventions where we're incorporating fasting, weight training, ketogenic diets, low carb approaches, many different things, stress management, sleep optimization, to keep the results going and to prevent your body from getting into that starvation mode again. That's key. Now, that's one huge issue that a lot of you guys are dealing with it. A couple more that I want to touch is, and I usually boil this down into 4 different categories. This would be not so much the reasons that you would stall. This would be some of the reasons why you're getting slower results. Number 1 is insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is a condition in which your body is no longer responding to insulin as well. Remember, insulin's job is to drive the glucose, and not just the sugar. By the way, the glucose is the sugar, but carbohydrates, protein, and fats. The macronutrients, your calories, it drives it from the blood into the cells. Insulin is a very powerful, in fact, the most powerful storage hormone in the body. And so under normal circumstances, under normal situations where you're not insulin resistant, your body will only produce insulin after a meal. So your blood sugar rises, insulin rises, and insulin gets the job done. So blood glucose lowers and then insulin lowers. If we were to graph a 24-hour period, even if you ate 4 to 6 meals, which is not ideal, and you'll learn if you haven't already learned from following my content online, you don't need to be eating that often. But even if you did, you would see many spikes of blood glucose and insulin. But over a 24-hour period, you wouldn't really see that much of insulin being elevated relative to 24 hours. But as you become more insulin resistant, there are some noticeable changes in how your body responds with insulin function. Even at the baseline when you're sleeping here in the beginning, so you're not eating, your insulin levels are higher simply at rest. Then as you begin to eat and have the insulin levels spike, they stay elevated for a little bit of a longer period of time. And when they come back down, they don't drop as low. So overall, you're having wider peaks and larger and higher baseline insulin levels. Therefore, the major takeaway here is as you become more insulin resistant, you end up having a scenario with more insulin levels elevated over that 24-hour period of time, which you can clearly see here in this pie graph compared to the first pie graph. Remember, these numbers are arbitrary and going to be different for you as an individual, but understand that the concept and the takeaway is that the number is larger. In the past, when you were more insulin sensitive, aka you were less resistant, you had a lower period over that 24-hour per day where insulin levels were elevated. Check out my insulin resistant video on the bottom of this link tree if you want to take a deeper dive specifically in insulin resistance. But lifestyle is the biggest contributing factor among stress and toxicity. And so now your body's not responding to insulin as well. And it has to do something because blood sugar rising will ultimately kill you, and surprisingly very fast. So your body starts producing more insulin just to get the job done. And as this situation gets worse, and any diabetics watching this, you know this all too familiar, First, you were pre-diabetic, then you were diabetic, then you needed a little bit of metformin, then you needed more metformin, then you needed a second medication like a sulfonylurea, maybe a third like a glipizide, and then you became insulin dependent. Then you needed a little bit of insulin, then you needed more insulin, and this entire pathway. And even if you're not diabetic, but the obesity, first it was 5 pounds, then it was 10, then it was 20, then it was 30, then it was 50, then it was 100. This insulin resistant path is very progressive, okay? But the one thing that you got to understand why you're looking to us, hopefully why you're here, is because you want to beat this. You don't buy into that bullshit narrative that the medical system wants you to believe that obesity and diabetes are chronic and irreversible. Nah, you think differently. And that's why you're watching this. And I have testimonies of thousands of people that can attest to what actually can be done. So insulin resistance creates this chronically elevated insulin situation, which medically they call it hyperinsulinemia. This is why you've always felt like anytime you've ever tried to lose weight, either the results were really slow or after you hit your goal, you had this constant propensity to regain the weight back. I mean, you guys tell me in the comments, how many times have you lost and regained the same amount of weight? Probably more than you can count. And this is because insulin resistance is that powerful. And in fact, out of the 4 things we're talking about right now, with I guess 5th because the metabolic plateau in its own category, this is probably the most important to understand for anybody who's had this ongoing lifelong battle. Okay, inflammation is number 2. Right there with insulin resistance, almost as often as a problem, but I still think IR, insulin resistance, is number 1. When I think of inflammation, you got to think of, and we've been talking about inflammation for how many years now, like chronic systemic inflammation. Autoimmune cases are probably the biggest category. Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, all these different various gut and GI autoimmune diseases, celiac diseases, and various levels of gluten sensitivities. When you have an autoimmune disease, you have a very overactive immune system, which is targeting the tissue for destruction. And now you have this excessive inflammation producing process, and inflammation will drive your insulin resistance up, and in its own pathways will contribute to the difficulties of dropping fat and putting your body and allowing it to get into fat burning mode. And in fact, it actually pushes, like insulin resistance and insulin, this propensity to be in storage. So we have to do something about inflammation, especially if you're watching this, if you are dealing with an autoimmune disease. Things like low dose naltrexone are very, very powerful, but also addressing it with lifestyle, the supplements, the nutrition, optimizing your life to live an anti-inflammatory lifestyle is what you're going to get in our coaching programs. Number 3, thyroid. Thyroid is horribly mismanaged in the medical establishment. You guys can probably relate to this because you had a test and it was the thyroid stimulating hormone, the TSH. Now, the reason why that's all they do in a standard medical Western model is because to a certain extent, the TSH does give you a reasonable estimate of a lot of people. If I had to guess, maybe 60%. That's a lot. But 40% is still a lot. Now, those are arbitrary numbers. It's impossible to know for certain, but it is an all too common occurrence of people who are, doctor says my thyroid's okay, yet I'm struggling with thyroid symptoms. Now, some of these are going to cross over into the starvation mode and zombie mode. And this is why doing a comprehensive blood panel is so important, which is what we like to do with our patients, because it allows us to distinguish true clinical hypothyroidism versus zombie mode. Because you don't need to treat zombie mode with thyroid hormone, but clinical hypothyroidism, you need to treat with thyroid hormone, at least for the time being. So in order to tell the difference, we do a panel, a comprehensive thyroid panel that not only has TSH, but it has free T4, free T3, reverse T3. Okay, we don't need to get into the science of that, but the extra markers allow us to distinguish, actually isolate and identify more true clinical hypothyroids and separate them from starvation mode. Some of you guys are dealing with the difficulty losing weight, the brain fog, the tiredness, the constipation, the feeling cold, the hair loss, maybe the achy body, the brittle skin and nails and dry skin. So these things are resultant of a clinical hypothyroid situation, unless specifically it could be a starvation mode. And so these markers, especially reverse T3, which is even more rare than free T3 and free T4, will allow us to distinguish and isolate. And since we do have medical practitioners on staff, put you on proper thyroid hormone support right away, because I'm going to tell you right now, trying to override a hypothyroid, a real hypothyroid. That's like trying to walk up a giant, massive hill with no support. It's just not going to happen. You need to isolate and boost your thyroid hormone to optimal levels to really get into some substantial weight loss. And then finally, cortisol, the one that nobody likes to talk about. Cortisol, for some of you, could be the very reason why you're not actually able to lose weight. Everything else can be dialed in, but your cortisol levels can be elevated. And there's many contributing factors to cortisol: stress in your life, maybe sleep deprivation. And so honing that in as the last element to a very comprehensive program is what we do. We isolate and know how to check and correct through lifestyle interventions various contributing factors to cortisol. So I want to summarize this for you guys because, again, hopefully you've had your first call and you're scheduled for your next call, or you can text this number here on the side of the screen if you haven't actually had a chance to even have your first consultation, or maybe you lost the number of the first guy. Maybe it was a while ago and you're ready to get a follow-up and you're watching this video right now. So that number can allow you, that goes to our regular schedulers, and you can take that number and shoot them a text message and get yourself scheduled. In summary, slow results and no results is not just a thing that happens with GLP-1 medications. In fact, if you actually know how to correct this, you know what causes it, it's not that common of an issue. Just ask many of the happy people in our program, because they can attest to what actually can be done when you have a solid program. So get onto that phone call. If you're not already scheduled, discuss with one of our experts what this looks like, and I'll see you guys in the next coaching call.